When I saw the staithes, I thought this is just an incredible piece of architecture, like an artwork in itself. It was like a launch pad for a spaceship. It's just the curve, all fully open, all of it still here. It was complete. I mean, they were the largest timber structure in what probably was in all of Europe at the time. And that's like half a kilometer of this kind of zigzagging wooden structure on all different levels, and architecturally absolutely astounding. It was just beautiful, and that was one of the things that attracted Amber to the northeast, was that all the industry was still there, and everything was the scale of the machinery, the structures, the ships, the cranes on the river. Everything was just fantastic scale. I mean, looking at the woodwork here, it makes me wonder how on earth they ever built this place, because it is sunk into the river itself, into the riverbed, which is quite rare. I mean, there were 30-odd staiths on River Tyne, and how on earth they built it, you can't imagine. In 1973, Amber Film and Photography Collective, that I was the founder member of, decided to do a collective project on the River Tyne, and I was allotted Dunston staithes. I can't remember whether I chose it or whether I was just suggested it. And at that time, there were no restrictions. None of the industries that we at Amber made documentaries and eventually feature films about required any kind of rigmarole in terms of having permissions or access. That was into the most dangerous, industries. So I came here and I just asked whoever was on the ground, do you think I could just go and take some photos of the workings of the staiths? And go ahead. Be careful, girl. It's quite dangerous up there. The men could not afford to take their eye off the job, so there was no posing for me. I think they sort of registered I was there, and they were, for a moment, they were a bit baffled and a bit amused, and then very generously just let me go about my business, which was to photograph what was going on. But it was very busy. Everybody was just fully engaged in what they were doing, and I obviously had to focus on what they were doing, because they could have put a foot wrong and disappeared, as some did. I never did recce's. I always had my camera on me, and at that time it was still a totally working staith on all levels, incredibly busy, incredibly noisy. I could be almost like a fly on the wall and just see what it was all about. It was a magnificent situation to be a photographer in. So there were teams of men working, and teamers on the top and trimmers on the bottom, the ships being loaded with coal, chutes of coal just shooting down, and all these coal holes that were not protected in any way. I mean, if I had not kept one eye on the ground and the other eye on the camera, I could have been down a coal hole into the clay bed below. And these things did happen. They did happen to the men who worked here. I was told of several accidents, not just falling off, but men being basically crushed to death or losing limbs. And at that time, it was so common that men who did lose limbs probably were found jobs in the offices at the staiths, so they continued to work here. I photographed the riders on, when the wagons arrived, they would hop on the brake levers to slow them down, to get them into position to offload. I mean, how dangerous is that? At Whitehill Point, Staiths, where I also photographed, they had a rotary tippler where the wagon would be rotated to an upside down position for the coal to run out. And just seeing how tiny the man next to it was, who was operating it all and working with it, all this huge machinery. And you could see the action going on all the different floors and levels of the staithes. Although the jobs for the teamers and trimmers were very highly prized and often ran in families from fathers to sons, and they were the elite workers at the staithes, and they were very well paid for their work. They themselves often paid for that privilege with their own lives, and that wasn't uncommon. Yet, to look at the men, I mean, one thing they didn't have was any kind of safety gear apart from welly boots. They didn't have any helmets or safety, what you would have nowadays. And they just came here in their own clothes, own cap, own outfit. And at the end of the day, they would just be dusted down to go back home in the same gear. Well, there was lots of oil and coal, of course. I mean, because it was kind of shooting down and the dust, coal dust everywhere. And the men, of course, they were covered in coal, soot and dust by the time they went home. So it was not the healthiest environment, obviously, to breathe either. What strikes me now is how quiet it is here. When 52 years ago when I was here, it was like a symphony of sound. It was so complex and so powerful. Actually really exciting. It was like a proper symphony. And now it's a great place for birds. Why it's important to keep this as a monument in its own right is that it is what Newcastle and the North East was built on. It was built on coal. And it was that industry and all its forms that made this place and made it wealthy. And I think these industrial sites and what's left of them can guide you to know more about the history. So should keep as much as can be kept and then bring people here to enjoy the structures and the site for what can be on offer now.